I didn't expect her to remember my coffee order. It was a small place, the kind that still had wobbly tables and the same 4 people pretending not to notice each other every morning. I came here out of habit more than anything else, half an hour before work, headphones in, phone out, scrolling without really seeing anything. But when she stepped in that morning, carrying a leather folder and a phone pressed to her ear, she didn't look like the kind of person who belonged in a place with chipped mugs. She ordered a black coffee. Then, without asking, she added quietly to the barista, "And a cappuccino, extra foam." "For him." Her eyes flicked toward me as she said it. That was the first time I noticed how green they were. I didn't know what to do with that. My hand was already on my own half-empty cup, lukewarm, so I just nodded, like this was normal. Like middle-aged women bought me coffee all the time. When she came over, she set the cappuccino on my table without looking at me. Just a quick, practical motion, then she slid into the chair across from mine as if we had planned this. "You're still looking?" she asked, opening her folder. Her voice was calm, unhurried. Not the kind of tone that made room for small talk. "Still looking," I said, trying not to stare at her hands as she smoothed the papers. They were elegant in a lived-in way. Rings not too shiny, nails short, a faint pen mark across her thumb like she'd been rushing earlier. She flipped through property listings, the kind of glossy photos I'd already scrolled past online. Kitchen staged with bowls of lemons, empty bedrooms that looked the same after a while. I realized I was folding the napkin in front of me, over and over, into smaller, tighter squares. "You never answer your texts," she said after a while, eyes still on the folder. It wasn't an accusation. Just an observation, the way people notice the weather. "I type them," I admitted, "and then don't send." Her mouth curved slightly, but she didn't smile. Not really. More like she understood. We sat in that kind of silence that doesn't need filling, except my coffee was cooling fast and the cappuccino sat untouched between us. Finally, she tapped one of the listings with her pen. "This one's different," she said. "Older place. Quiet street. Has a private room in the back." The way she said private room made something in me pause. I don't think she meant anything by it. Maybe she didn't. But her eyes lingered on mine a second too long before she turned the page. I nodded, though I hadn't really looked at the photo. She gathered her folder, set down enough money to cover both drinks, and stood. "I'll text you the address." I wanted to say something back, something casual, something that wouldn't sound like I was trying too hard, but all I managed was, "Okay." She left the coffee untouched on the table, and I sat there with the folded napkin in my hand, watching the door close behind her. When my phone buzzed 10 minutes later, it was her message, "Tomorrow. Noon. Don't be late." And underneath the address, almost like an afterthought, she'd added, "Bring comfortable shoes." The house was quiet enough to hear our footsteps echo. She led me through the narrow hallway with the kind of ease that came from showing 100 houses before this one, but I noticed how she slowed at certain corners, like she was waiting for me to catch up. The air smelled faintly of old wood and dust, sunlight cutting in through crooked blinds. We paused in the kitchen. It was plain, nothing special. She filled the kettle, humming under her breath while I leaned against the counter, unsure of what to do with my hands. "Most people want open floor plans," she said, flicking the switch on. "But I like walls. Rooms you can close off." I wasn't sure if that was about the house or about her. While the water heated, she handed me a chipped mug from a cupboard. Not staged, just there. Like she knew where the owners kept it. She made tea for both of us, setting mine down without asking if I wanted sugar. Somehow she knew I didn't. We sat across from each other at the old wooden table. The silence wasn't awkward exactly, but it was heavy in a way that made me acutely aware of the curve of her wrist resting against the mug, the way her eyes stayed on me just long enough to make me look away. She broke it first. I used to live in a house like this, she said. Before. She stopped, pressing her lips together. Then, almost offhand, before the divorce. I nodded, though I didn't know what to say. My son hated the creaky floors, she added with a faint smile. He said the house tattled on him every time he tried to sneak out. I almost asked how old her son was. Then I realized the answer might remind both of us why this conversation felt dangerous. Instead, I said quietly, I kind of like when places remember things. She tilted her head, studying me like I'd said more than I had. The kettle whistled. She stood too quickly, poured water into her cup, and stirred though she hadn't added anything. My phone buzzed on the table. I didn't check it. Neither did she, though her eyes flickered toward the sound before she looked away. Something in me wanted to bridge the distance, to ask about her son, to admit that I'd typed out a dozen texts to her after she left the cafe and deleted every one. But instead, I wrapped my hands around the mug, holding on to its heat like it might ground me. She sat back down, and for a moment we didn't speak. The only sound was the spoon tapping softly against porcelain. Then, as if it were the most natural thing, she reached across the table and smoothed the corner of the napkin I had folded too tightly in my palm. Just a small motion, her fingers brushing mine for half a second before retreating. It could have meant nothing. But walking home later, I couldn't stop replaying it. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The second time we saw the house, it rained. Not heavy, just a steady drizzle that blurred the windows and left the floor near the door damp where we'd both tracked in water. She set her umbrella against the wall, hair slightly out of place, and laughed softly at herself as she brushed the drops from her sleeve. I'd never seen her laugh before. Not like that. It startled me. We wandered the rooms again, slower this time. She let me walk ahead, but I felt her presence behind me, the faint sound of her heels against the old wooden floorboards. In the back room, the one she'd called private, she stopped in the doorway while I stepped inside. The room was small, just a window overlooking the yard. Quiet. Could be an office, she said finally. Or something else, I replied, not sure what I meant. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked out the window, arms folded, shoulders drawn tight. The air between us shifted, closer and further at the same time. I turned, wanting to say something to close the gap, but the sound of footsteps on the porch froze us both. A man's voice called through the door, her colleague, another agent, carrying a folder. He stepped in, shaking rain from his coat, nodding at me like I was just another client. Her tone changed instantly, professional, clipped. We're just finishing up, she said. I watched the way her posture straightened, the way her smile became thinner, safer. Like a door closing. He asked a few practical questions, glanced around, then excused himself, promising to update the paperwork later. The door shut. Silence again. But something had broken. She avoided my eyes, busying herself with her phone, tapping out a message that probably didn't need sending. I stood there, the room suddenly smaller, wanting to say, "Don't pull away like that." Instead, I asked, "Do you always keep things separate?" She looked up sharply, as if I'd said more than I had. "Lines matter," she said. "In this job." Then, softer, almost to herself. "In life." Her voice carried something fragile, almost warning. I nodded, though my chest tightened with the weight of everything unspoken. She moved past me, brushing my arm lightly as she did. Not an accident. But not deliberate either. Back in the kitchen, she busied herself with opening cabinets, checking cupboards that didn't need checking. I leaned against the counter, watching her, wondering if she could feel my gaze. At one point, she reached up to open a shelf too high, stretching on her toes. Without thinking, I stepped forward, close enough that I could have taken the jar for her. My hand hovered, hesitating, before pulling back. She turned close enough that her shoulder nearly grazed mine. For a heartbeat, either of us moved. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then away, and she drew in a breath like she was about to speak, but the sound of her phone buzzing on the table cut through it. She stepped back, answering quickly, her voice brisk again. The moments slipped. But as I left, the rain falling harder now, I could still feel that half-second when distance almost didn't exist. The next time I went to the cafe, she wasn't there. Her absence felt louder than her presence usually did. I sat at the same table, ordered the same cappuccino, but the cup cooled untouched while I kept checking the door. Every time the bell above it rang, I looked up. Not her. When her text finally came, it was brief. Can't make it today. Busy. Nothing else. No apology, no explanation. I told myself it was fine. People get busy. But the words felt like they'd been written too quickly, like she'd cut them down from something longer. For 2 days, nothing. On the third, I went to see the house alone. The agent's lockbox clicked open easily enough, and I walked through the rooms in silence, hearing my own footsteps where hers should have been. In the back room, I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, staring at the window. I tried to picture it, her standing here, brushing her hair back, tapping her nails against her cup like she always did. But the image wouldn't settle. When my phone finally buzzed, I grabbed it too fast. But it wasn't her. A friend checking in. I typed back something distracted, then opened her old messages, scrolling until I hit the first one. Bring comfortable shoes. That line still made me smile, even though I couldn't explain why. Later that evening, she called. Not texted, called. I answered before the second ring. Her voice was calm, polite, professional. I need to let you know, she said. My son's back in town. He's staying with me for a while. I didn't know what to say to that. The words tangled in my throat. She must have felt the silence stretch, because she added quickly. So I may not have as much time for showings. Just wanted to be clear. Clear. The line buzzed faintly. I could hear voices in the background, a man's laugh, her son, probably. Younger than me? Older? Didn't matter. When we hung up, I just sat there staring at the black screen of my phone. The next morning, I didn't go to the cafe. I told myself I needed the extra sleep, but the truth was, I couldn't face the empty chair across from mine. I drafted a message that night. I miss our walks. Just tell me if this is over. My thumb hovered over send. But I never pressed it. Instead, I set the phone face down on the table and stared at the wall until the room felt heavier than I could hold. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It happened on her doorstep. Late evening, the street dim and quiet, the kind of silence that makes every sound too sharp. I hadn't planned on coming by, I just walked without thinking, ended up in front of her building. When she opened the door, she looked surprised. Not angry. Not exactly pleased. Just caught. Her hair pulled back, no makeup, a loose sweater. More ordinary than I'd ever seen her, which made her feel even further away. You shouldn't. She started, but didn't finish. She stepped aside. I walked in. Her apartment smelled faintly of tea and something baked earlier in the day. A lamp glowed in the corner, throwing soft light across the kitchen table, where 2 mugs sat drying upside down. Her son's voice wasn't anywhere. He must have been out. I stood there, not knowing what to do with my hands, with my breath. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, waiting. Finally I said, I keep not saying things. And then hating myself after. Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp but tired. Then say it. I swallowed hard. My throat felt raw. I don't want to just be a client. Or a kid you feel sorry for. I don't even know what I am to you. But I know I don't want this to stop. The words sat there, heavier than I meant them to be. She let out a small breath, lowering her gaze. Her hand rubbed absent circles against her sleeve, like she was buying time. You think it's simple, she said. But it isn't. I've got history, responsibilities, a son who's too close to your age, people who would never understand. I don't care what they think, I said too quickly. Then softer. I just care what you think. That made her look up at me, finally, fully. And for the first time since the rain, she didn't hide what was in her eyes. I think you make me feel seen, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. And that terrifies me. Because I don't know how to carry that without breaking something. We stood there, motionless, the space between us feeling like the sharpest edge. I took a step closer. Not enough to touch, but enough that the air shifted. So what do we do? Her lips curved, small, uncertain, but real. She shook her head once, then let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. I don't know, she said. Then, after a pause, softer. But okay. The word landed like a release. Not a promise. Not forever. Just a human answer in a quiet kitchen at the end of a long day. And it was enough. Time didn't change everything at once. There wasn't a moment when she suddenly stopped being my real estate agent and started being something else. It was slower than that, like water wearing a groove into stone. Some days we didn't see each other at all. Other days I'd pass her building at 8:47 a.m., and there she was, locking her door with a travel mug in hand. She'd glance up, catch me looking, and raise her brow in a mock you again expression. I'd shrug, pretending coincidence, though we both knew better. The house never happened. Someone else bought it. I thought I'd care, but I didn't. She admitted one afternoon on the park bench, same one, the pigeons gone this time, that she'd known I wouldn't buy it. You weren't looking for walls, she said, sipping her black coffee. You were looking for space. We laughed at that. Not loudly. Just enough. Her son came and went, and so did my excuses for not calling her. What stayed was smaller, steadier, cups of tea in her kitchen, the sound of her humming without realizing, the way she'd set a folded napkin in front of me before I asked. Little habits that didn't feel borrowed anymore. There were still pauses. Still moments where she'd look at me like she was pulling back into herself, questioning whether this could last, whether it should. And maybe I had my doubts too, on nights when I lay awake and replayed everything, every almost touch, every half smile, every silence that felt too loud. But then there'd be something simple. A walk after work, both of us carrying too many bags. Her handing me one without asking, like she knew I'd take it. Or the time she brewed tea, forgot the sugar, and when I didn't mention it, she noticed anyway, pressing her lips into a faint smile. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd write down to prove love existed. But it stayed. One Sunday morning, I found myself sitting across from her at the cafe, the same table where it started. The cappuccino in front of me was warm, the black coffee in her hand already half gone. She leaned back in her chair, eyes on me, quiet. Still folding napkins? She said, nodding at the one between my hands. I looked down, laughed softly. The habit had never left me. Still noticing, I replied. Her smile wasn't wide, but it was enough. And in that moment, I realized life hadn't given me a grand resolution. It had given me this, a seat across from her, the warmth of a mug, the weight of someone finally staying. I don't think anyone else would have seen it. But we did. And that was enough. Sparkles, did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?